today is how do these companies actually make the right and the critical adjustments at the right time. So if you think about executing for speed or with speed, it's really about the adjustments that you make. When do you make them, and what are the right ones? I have the image of a crew team here, and I love the image of the crew team. I especially love the crew team with 9 guys or gals on there, okay? And that's the crew team with 8 oarsmen and 1 coxswain. Why do I like that, and why do I say it's a really amazing example of executing with speed? Well, it's because typically it's not the strongest crew team that wins, but it is the one that's most aligned, that can pull the most synchronicity, okay, the most alignment. And by the way, the coxswain is the little guy that sits at the back of the boat, and he typically sets the rate of the way they're pulling. He sets the stroke rate, and the coxswain also makes the critical adjustments to win races. And coxswain, the word coxswain actually means boat servant. So the coxswain actually focuses, steers the boat, maintains alignment, and make adjustments. Now, how important is that? Well, a boat can lose about 3 seconds over a 2,000-meter course if the coxswain deviates from the straight line or from keeping the boat aligned to the course that they're on. The USA women's team, by the way, won gold in the last Olympics, and their coxswain, Mary, became their coxswain in 2006. The USA women's team has not lost a race since Mary became the coxswain. So that gives you a good idea of how important it is to make the right adjustments at the right time. So let me kick off with a business example. And one of our clients we're very lucky to have is Veeam. Veeam is a global software company. Their executives are on various continents. They are growing fast. And what Veeam does is they provide modern data protection. They are built for virtualization, and they have a powerful, easy to use, and affordable solution. So last year I sat in on one of their weekly meetings to give them some input, and after about 5 minutes, they took about 5 minutes to discuss the various statuses, and then the head of sales for North America kind of spoke up and said, hey guys, let's not waste time on status now, but let's talk about some of the brutal facts. And the number one priority was not okay. I won't tell you what it was, but it wasn't okay. So then they spent the rest of the meeting discussing what, how, where, what kind of adjustments to make. This is a strong discipline they have, and these are guys and gals that actually have to dial into the meeting from different continents, okay, from Europe, from the US, and so it's at different times of the day for them. But they all dial into one call once a week to get focused, aligned, accountable to the plan, so they can make the adjustments. So this discipline and these kind of adjustment meetings have helped them actually finish Q4 2012 strongly. And just using the same metaphor, it's kind of put their boat into the water strong for 2013 to win again. Now, how did Veeam do this? How did they do this is they focused on, they did 3 things I'm going to show you today. They had a very clear focus and KPIs to help them align. Secondly, they had a very simple do rhythm because, you know, nothing happens unless you actually get work done. So they had a very simple do rhythm, and every team member is very well prepared for their weekly meetings to address stocks. By the way, you hear me say this a couple times today, the weekly meeting is a very expensive meeting because you've got your top executives in that meeting with you, and just think about the dollars spent on payroll in that 1 or 2 hours that you're together. So how well you prepare for that meeting dictates what your return on payroll is for that hour or 2. So for those of you who answer that you spend 30 minutes preparing for that weekly meeting, you guys are good. For the rest of you, I'm sorry to say, you can improve your return on payroll. Spend a little bit more time preparing, and you'll have a much better meeting. Okay, and then the third thing they do is once they finish that and they're in the meetings, they do the right adjustments weekly so they can stay focused, aligned, and accountable and not lose any speed in their execution. So using that as an example or a pattern of success, I want you to think about yourselves right now. And if you're attending this with your team members, it's a good time to look around the room and ask each other, what about you? You know, what kind of critical adjustments do you guys make on a weekly basis? So the 3 things I want to talk about today. One is clear KPIs. Second is simple do rhythms. And the third is weekly accountability, so you can make the critical adjustments. I have to tell you that, you know, for those of you who've heard me speak before, it's in the nuances of how you use these tools. And so if you guys have never seen me speak, then it's the first time you're getting this content. For those of you, many of you have heard me speak before, ask yourselves, how do you take yourself up a level, up a notch in your path of progress? Because what I've found is that all teams, if they have a path of progress that continually improves their skill level of doing things together, those are the teams that get better and better and better and ultimately beat the competition. So something for everybody. If you're new and this is great content, awesome. If you've heard me speak before, ask yourselves, what are the nuances? How can you take your execution up a notch? So before I share the 3 areas, I want to give you some speed killers. So these are some things I want to introduce you to, pitfalls that I've noticed that slow you down. So these are the things that you need to stop, you need to say no to. So let me give you a couple. First, activities versus priorities. Sometimes I'm in a weekly meeting. I've sat in a lot of weekly meetings. I hear people talk and talk and talk, and they're talking about all the things they are doing. And then I ask the question, hey, why are we doing these things and what's the priority? And sometimes, unfortunately more often than not, people go quiet and they're like, well, I don't know. What was the priority? So keeping busy sometimes can help you miss the most important thing. So don't get fooled by activity versus priorities. Always understand, beginning of the end in mind, what is the priority that you're focused on. Secondly, I went with a team recently, sat on a meeting recently, and I asked them the same question, the same polling question that you guys had in the beginning. How much time do you spend on status versus solutions? They gave me their answer. I sat in their meeting. I'll share with you that they thought that they were spending about 30% of the time on status, 70% on solution. I actually timed them, and I found that they spent 70% of the time on status, 30% of the time on solutions. So why is that, and how do I know the difference? Well, if you are talking about how something happened, and you know, and who did what when, and arguing over whether something was really right or wrong, that's status. If you shift it over to what we're going to do now is, what are the actions we're going to take now are, the next steps is that, Janet, you do this, and John, you do that. Now you're into solutions. So you can actually time yourself, and I highly recommend that. Just time 1 or 2 of your weekly meetings. You might be surprised at how much time you spend in status versus solutions. Assessing blame is another one. It's very natural, by the way. You know, if I'm hitting some high points or some hot spots, this is why I'm here. I'm here to help you guys. But I found that assessing blame is one of those areas where, you know, something went wrong, something's red, and it's just very natural for us to go, what the heck happened? How did that go red? What's wrong with you? Okay, so we need to hold off on those things and not worry about it till like later. But at this meeting, with everyone at the table, don't assess blame. Let's just focus on what we're going to do next. And then finally, sometimes after lots of discussion, we agree we're going to do X, but we forgot to say who. And I know that's really fundamental, but it happens. We'll go, yeah, okay, we're going to do that. Great. Someone's going to do that, right? Great. Next topic. And then next week we come back and we have the same meeting. We go, well, who was the someone whose name was accountable? Who is the who, what, when? And we forgot to assign that. So these are the speed killers that I want you guys to think about as you do your weekly meetings and get your speed up. Okay, the first one, the right baseline KPIs for your team. This is really, really important, and I found that there are essentially only a handful of KPIs that you need to drive speed and action. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that there are not more metrics you want to measure, but there are typically only a handful of KPIs that the key executive team needs to really focus on. So this is White Lodging, by the way. So even White Lodging, I'll tell you a quick story here. They're a YPO company, $1 billion in revenues, managing north of 170 hotels. Even a company that large, and they manage the JW Marriott in Indianapolis, and this is the photo I'm showing you. Even a company this large, they only have 6 metrics that they track that the executive team worries about. Now, again, I'll share with you, that doesn't mean they don't have more metrics outside that they track within the company, but these are the 6 that they really, really care about as an executive team. These are the 6 that they use to align the company up and down, from the CEO all the way down through the vice presidents the regional vice presidents, and every one of the 170 hotel general managers. Now, how did they arrive at 6? Well, they started with actually quite a few, and sometimes we have too many KPIs, you get blinded, okay? Too confusing and difficult to take action. So they worked with their coach at Gazelle Systems, and we helped them focus on what the main thing is for them. And first, we have to be really clear on what results they wanted to have. You have to really understand. You know, Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind, and I could not agree more. So they figured out some of the key results that they really wanted to track. And let me be very clear. Results metrics are very important because it tells you what you have achieved, what you can learn from them. But you cannot manage by them. Managing by results indicators is like driving your car using the rear view mirror only versus the windshield, because what's already happened are the results. What's about to happen is looking through your windshield. So to manage looking forward, you need leading indicators. And then they have 4. There are 4 key leading indicators of the 6 to help them look through the windshield. So I'm not going to share with you all of their details, but I will share with you one of them is the guest survey score. That's a leading indicator of whether or not the guests are going to be happy. And it's a leading indicator, guys. Happy guests equals happy hotels. So that's one of the 4 that they keep track of that goes all the way up and down the line. This KPI is used to focus the CEO, align every single person, and it allows alignment both ways, by the way. It allows alignment from management down to the front line, but it also then allows data to come back from the front lines back up, all the way to the CEO. And that insight is very important for them to make the key decisions that they've made. And therefore, this simple tool enables a $1 billion company to move fast, react quickly, to be focused, aligned, accountable, and therefore able to adjust. So I want you to think about yourselves. What are just a couple of KPIs that you think will help you get there, right? So do yourselves a favor. Do a KPI audit. And I ask a very simple question, you know, which KPIs drive action, which don't? And then if you start there and then kind of boil it down to what are the 2 or 3 main ones that you really care about that drive action, you know, and you can really focus on your main thing, that would be great. That would be totally awesome. Okay, red, yellow, green. You cannot adjust if you're not accountable. So what I'm talking about is how do you and what do you adjust to? How do you know, right? And so red, yellow, green is about success criteria. And here's how it works, you know. Green is the goal. Green is good. Red is unacceptable performance. Red is failure. And yellow is in between. And then I have something called super green, which is the stretch goal. So you cannot adjust if you don't know what you have to align to, and it's very hard for you to align if you don't have clear success criteria on what you're trying to shoot for. For example, if I think that red is X, but you think Y, we're going to have more drama in our weekly meeting arguing whether something is acceptable or something's not acceptable. However, if you begin your quarter before that even happens and understand what is unacceptable performance, we don't have to discuss and argue on that point anymore in a weekly meeting. We can go straight to figuring out how to get out of red. Typically, people I've noticed manage themselves away from red. So the trick here is holding people accountable. You don't want them in the red zone. They don't want themselves in the red zone. The red zone is good only for the NFL, but for all others, being in red is kind of a bad thing. So you've got to have clear success criteria for your KPIs, okay? What's the goal, green? What's the stretch goal, super green? What's unacceptable, red? And then what's in between, which is yellow. Once you have that, how do you communicate up and down your company? Because to execute for speed, it's all about communication. I've found too often that the CEO would say something or the executive team would say something, and then when I visit and do a hallway test, you know, and ask somebody down the line, they don't really know what the main thing is for the company for the quarter. So you want to communicate quickly. And when you were smaller, it was easy to communicate with everyone that was, you know, kind of around you. But then your employees' numbers grew. Your team exploded in numbers and layers in order to support your growth. So we all need an accountability system, something that can allow us to communicate so that we can get the accountability to our goals and then we can adjust. And so as I shared with you, we have a number of rhythm clients on this webcast. And here's my tip for our rhythm customers whom I love. And I always prepare something for you guys for this webcast. So this is Evan Exchange, one of our clients as well. They have a critical KPI dashboard. What you see here, they, by the way, are electronic e-payments company. They're doing great. And in a particular quarter, they were focusing on getting the e-payments up. And there were two critical KPIs that aligned the whole company, all the way down to every single person in the company. The number of electronic payments being done and number of sales contracts being sold that had e-payments in there. And these are the two things that they knew everywhere in the company, from the CEO all the way down. So it's a very simple dashboard, two KPIs. This represents the critical numbers for the quarter. This, guys, is a best practice. So if you're a rhythm client and you haven't started doing this yet, please talk to your rhythm coach. Your rhythm coach will help you think about your quarter, focus down on the two KPIs, and drive your results faster. Now, for those of you who are not rhythm clients, you can do this too. You can do this too. And so that's why I have a tool for you guys. And this is a free tool. It's my gift to you. It's my 13-week dashboard tool. So please download this and use it to make the critical adjustments that you need to do every single week. Let me show you a little bit about how to use this today. There's 3 steps. The first step is you want to develop KPIs, the right ones. And I'm only asking you to come up with 1 or 2. Less is more, and you don't want to get blinded. So there's 3 steps. Step 1 is, what are the right KPIs? So here are some of the questions that I would ask you if we were in a coaching session. What's your main thing for the quarter? What's the result you want? Remember, you have to always begin with the end in mind, and that's the result. And what can you measure to look through the windshield? And remember, you need to know the results, but the results typically measure things which have already happened, hence the word results. So therefore, you just want to know, what can you look at? What KPI, key performance indicator, can you look at that is the leading indicator that you look through the windshield? So take a minute right now. I'm going to take some questions. You can do 2 things while I'm taking questions. If you're with your teams, have a quick discussion now on what is your main thing. What is your main thing for the quarter? What do you want to achieve this quarter, and what can actually push the hardest for you, right? What do you have the most leverage on? What can give you some visibility of what's happening and that you can measure? You don't want to get blindsided. You don't want to get blindsided. You want to know that usually there's some things that happen in week 4 or 5 that already tell you if you're going to have a good quarter or a bad quarter. And so what are those things, 1 or 2 things that you can look at? So while folks are thinking about that, Ryan, it may be a good time to take a couple of minutes and see if any questions have come through. And by the way, guys, it's really lonely doing this webcast, okay? There's like 120 of you guys online, but I'm sitting here all by my lonely self. So if you have a question, please type it into Ryan, and I'll help you today. So Ryan, any questions to help me escape from my loneliness today?
Yes, thanks, Patrick. We've got a couple of questions here, and as Patrick said, please go ahead and type into your question box in your GoToWebinar control panel if any questions that you've had based on the content today. The first question is this from John. He asked, what are the 3 most common KPIs that companies discuss in their weekly meetings?
Okay, what are the 3 most common KPIs? That's a good question. Every company looks at things differently, so I can't really give you 3 common KPIs, but I can give you the 3 most common areas I've seen. Usually, people always have something on sales. Sales is lifeblood of the company. If you don't have a good KPI to help you see as a leading indicator, not number of deals closed, but a leading indicator of how sales is going to be, you probably want something there. Then typically, I see something on the production or delivery side. If it's a manufacturing company, on production, if it's a service-oriented company, on the delivery end. And then the third thing I see is I typically see people nowadays having something very key that they measure and look at for customers. Are their customers happy? And as you could see with the white lodging example I gave you, one of theirs was the guest survey score, which is about the customer happiness. And so every company looks at these 3 areas differently, but these are 3 very good areas to have. However, guys, what the question didn't ask, but what does get neglected sometimes, which is important, are employees. And if you have shareholders, what makes the shareholders happy? And then finally, record keeping. Those are 3 areas that sometimes I see people forget about.
Thanks, Patrick. I got another question from Alex. He says, what if our KPI is not the right one? Should we adjust the KPI? Should
you adjust the KPI? Well, how do we know it's the right one? Well, first, you go back to one of my earlier slides. KPIs to me are about taking action and adjustments, right? So if the KPI you're measuring goes red and you don't really care, in other words, you don't really take action, you look at it and you say, oh, that's probably okay, then you have the wrong KPI. So the KPIs that you measure, it has to help you with action. So I would say, make sure you're measuring as your KPI things you want to move. So what you want to move, you want to potentially measure. Now, how do you know when to change them? KPIs should engage the company to solve problems. And we're human. I've noticed that unless the KPI is an action trigger, makes us take action, gives us high-quality discussions, we get bored. So if it gets boring, whether it's a quarter or two, it's time to move on. Do not be afraid to stop and change your KPIs that you're measuring. And typically, I like to suggest to all my clients that at least once a year you do a KPI audit. Some things that you thought were very important yesterday may not be so important tomorrow. So you want to do a KPI audit at least once a year to make sure that you have the right things.
Thanks. I have another question from Dorota. Dorota asks, how do you relate company KPIs to individual KPIs, and who is accountable for the company KPIs?
That's a really good question. So how do you relate company KPIs to individuals? First of all, understand something. The company is not human. I have people laugh when I say that. Company is not human, guys. Company can't do anything. So every single company KPI must be owned by a human being. And typically, at the senior executive team level, I would suggest that you have KPIs in different areas, right? So in the example I gave you, sales, production, customer service. Let's just stick with that simple example. Sales KPI is probably owned by the head of sales. The customer happiness KPI is probably owned by customer service or customer advocacy. Production or delivery is probably owned by services or manufacturing or somebody that affects that, right? So what you don't want to do is you don't want all the KPIs to be owned by your poor CFO or your poor COO. He could do the measurements and take the measurements, but you want the accountability to make that KPI move to be in the hands of other people in the executive team. You do not want all the KPIs owned by someone. And typically, those will then also become their personal KPIs. So for example, if your company, you care about number of proposals generated, well, that's probably going to be the personal KPI for your head of sales as well. And then within the sales department, there may be other KPIs, but for the head of sales reporting it to the executive team, it is his or her personal KPI.
Thanks, Patrick. We got time for one more, then we got to move on. This question's from Ken. He says, I run a support team, and with support, there are many different aspects of the process that's important to us. Do you think having 6 or 7 focused KPIs is too much?
That's a very good question. So if you're in a support team, at the support team level, I wouldn't report 6 KPIs up to the executive team. In your support team level, I would say, okay, what is the one most important thing that's good for my senior executive team to know about? I will report that KPI. Then within your support team, I think you may have done the right thing, right? There may be 6 things. It could be your process. It could be your functions. But those are the 6 levers that you have to make sure that you're supporting people correctly. And that's great. And so within your support team, you have those 6 KPIs. But help make sure that everyone understands how those 6 KPIs connect dot-wise back to the one main support KPI that you then post up at executive team level. Okay, Ryan, I think we got to move on, man.
Yep.
Sounds good?
Yep.
Okay, step 2. Step 2, you're going to red, yellow, green this. And I kind of shared this a little bit, but this sometimes gets glossed over. I've been there before. I've walked many miles in your shoes. After a long day or 2 days of planning, it's now 2, 3 p.m., and we've done our goals. We've done our priorities. We've got our rocks. And we're happy. And then we say, oh, wait a minute, Patrick tells us we got a red, yellow, green. And you look at each other, your eyes roll, and you say, guys, come on, we're big guys, we know how to do that, let's get out of here. Actually, no, you need to stop, and you need to actually work on your red, yellow, greens, because I found that this is the pitfall that does not allow executive teams or other teams to have great weekly meeting discussions. Can you imagine if we're having a meeting, and I say, hey, I think that just to pick on R&D because I'm knee-deep in my R&D projects right now. I think R&D is doing a good job. And somebody else says, Patrick, I don't really think so. I said, what do you mean? Look at the goal. The goal is to deliver, version 2 of our software in April or whatever. And somebody says, yeah, but what does deliver really mean? I mean, do we mean beta customers? Do we mean new customers? What do we really mean? And then the head of R&D says, hey, I just meant beta customers. The head of sales says, no, I thought that meant to real customers, not just beta customers. Now you're going to waste half an hour between these two folks with the best intentions in mind, arguing what success really means. I don't know if that case study or that example resonates with you, but I've seen it happen with a lot of my clients where they have to say they have the correct priority. Yes, they do, but they didn't take the time to discuss what red, yellow, green is. And that takes a little bit more time. So when you do your red, yellow, green, right, and this is pretty simple to understand, maybe not so hard to do in a team, the goal, your stretch goal, an acceptable performance, and yellow is in between. This helps you to align expectations, allows you to have a very quick accountability discussion. Here's the way it should go. Hey, how's the R&D thing on R2? And your head of R&D should say, it is yellow. And there should be no discussion about yellow. It should be clear. It's yellow because what? And therefore, what needs do we have and how do we help us go from yellow to green? Then you spend all the rest of your time on how to go from yellow to green versus, well, when you say yellow, what did you really mean again? Oh, you mean that? Well, no, I think that's red, dude. Right? So you kind of get rid of all that drama. So your success criteria, easy to understand, is one of the hardest things to do because unfortunately it's at the end of your planning meeting. Don't skip this step. You skip this step, you will not have good weekly meetings. Finally, I call it extra credit. You notice the section in the middle, adjustments that you would make. But, well, by the way, if you haven't noticed yet, the bottom part of this tool has an example. So what you see at the bottom is a dashboard where there are 4 KPIs. I've shown you actual red, yellow, green criteria in there, and over the 13 weeks it has been status, green, yellow, red, and then you see that at the very bottom, cash flow runway, yellow equals stop hiring, etc. Those are the adjustments that you would write down in the area that I've colored green right now. So in your planning meeting, what adjustments would you make that, to that particular because of that particular KPI being red or yellow? By the way, some adjustments cannot be thought of out beforehand, and that's fine. But some can. Some can. So for example, if cash is low, let's make sure we are clear what low means. And I have this example at the bottom, cash flow runway. Super green is 12 months of cash in your cash flow runway. Green is 7, and red is 3. Right? So we became very clear. So again, we don't argue at the time, hey, what's red, what's yellow, what's green. And secondly, I found cash to be one of those things where if you don't have it, you can't think. I found that I cannot think when I'm freaking out. I don't know if you can, but I can't. So for cash, I would suggest that while your heads are clear, you make some decisions as to how you would execute if cash became red or yellow. Quite a few of our clients have actually used this particular KPI for their cash, and it has helped them hit issues off at the pass. It has helped them make decisions, execute on decisions while their heads were fuzzy. Because, try this, right? Everyone just grab your neck and squeeze. That's less oxygen, right? It's kind of hard to listen to me talk, let alone interact with me if someone is squeezing your neck. So that's how you're going to feel if you don't have cash. So for things where you realize that if that KPI goes red or yellow, we're going to freak out, we're going to do stupid things. Let's make some decisions now while we can think, so we don't make stupid decisions. Okay? So step 2 and 3, red, yellow, green, and then the extra credit for the KPIs that can let you think of adjustments up front. Do that now. So that was just 2 quick slides, but very important areas, and I thought that I'll pause just for a couple of minutes again, Ryan, to see if there are any questions.
Yes, we do have a couple more questions. Dorota's asking, the baseline KPIs, she's a one-page plan user, so are the baseline KPIs the same KPIs that you put at the very top of the one-page strategic plan, relationship, process KPIs?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So at the very top of the one-page plan, we have 6 areas, all right? And 3 of them are for relationships, as you pointed out, and 3 of them are for process. And so yes, those baseline KPIs that I've been talking about, those are the ones that I would put up there in the one-page plan.
And I got another question from Jeremy. Jeremy's asking, why do we need a yellow? What's yellow really for? If we miss our goal, isn't that red?
Jeremy, that's amazing. I get asked this question all the time, by the way. So red is failure, yellow is not quite successful, but why the heck do we need yellow, right? So yellow is typically, let me just give you a sales example. The example is easier than me explaining it. Let's say your sales quota is $1 million. The sales rep does $900,000. You're going to fire that guy? Probably not. Maybe some of you will, I don't know, but for me, probably not. So then I'll ask my client the question, okay, great, you're not going to fire that guy. What's the number that if he continually sustains that level of performance for 2 or 3 quarters, you would fire him for? And sometimes I get the number that's 500,000, sometimes it's 600, sometimes it's 700. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever it is that you want it to be. So let's just say it's 500,000 for my example. So that's red. So if somebody does 900,000 in sales, yes, they missed the goal, but they're not failing. And what you want to do is you want to help them get to the goal, but you probably don't want to shoot them. And that's why I think yellow is important. I actually had a vice president of sales come up to me at a public workshop a couple of years ago, and she actually thanked me for what she said. Patrick, you gave me the gift of yellow. It helped me to actually coach my team in a much more positive way. She said, it used to be that when somebody missed a quota by a little bit, I'd whack him just as hard as somebody who totally missed the quota. And I began to realize that, for somebody who got under a certain number, that was unacceptable failure. But for the guys who missed it by a little bit, I changed my style. I really helped them to then think about how they could tweak the stuff a little bit so that they could actually get to green. So that's why I think yellow is important.
Thanks, Patrick. And we got time for one more before we need to move on. Jim's asking, what type of KPIs should we have adjustment actions determined beforehand?
What type of, okay, so that's a good question. So again, it's the stuff that I think you have a hard time working on or thinking when they're red. And the example I gave you just now was cash flow. Very hard to think when you're freaking out. So now, by the way, I do think that any KPI that you can come up with adjustment actions beforehand is a really good thing. So maybe your question, Jim, should actually be asked in reverse, which is what type of KPIs should we not come up with adjustment actions with beforehand? And I would say the kind of KPIs where you just cannot predict what you would do if they were red or yellow. Okay? But for most other KPIs, if you could at least pen some adjustment actions, you're better off than not having anything. And even if you feel like you want to adjust your actions later, believe me, it's a lot easier to edit than to create. Another example would be sales. If things are not working, what are some additional actions you could take? What's your plan B? What if your leads aren't coming in? How are you going to juice that? Okay. What are some additional things you would spend money on to go get more leads? Stuff like that.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. Let's move on.
Okay. All right, we have 20 minutes left and 2 key areas for me to cover. So personal do rhythm to identify your stucks. That's the second thing, is preparation for your weekly meeting. And so I've got this thing I call meeting with myself, right? And this is, I suggest that you spend about 30 minutes to close out your week. How did you do this week? Victories. What status, how are you doing on your priorities and your KPIs? Go ahead and status them. What went great? What learnings? Where am I stuck? And then what are you going to do next week? What are you going to focus on next week? I introduced our topic earlier. I said, hey, your weekly meeting is one very expensive meeting, right? It is. I mean, think of the executives that are meeting with you in a room for 2 hours or an hour. Think of the number of people. Think of the salaries per person. That's your payroll being spent for 2 hours. And if every one of you would take 30 minutes to really close out your week, think of your victories, think of what you want to do, what are the stucks, come prepared to engage in good discussions with your teammates so you can help each other, that would be great. So how would you use the tool I gave you, right? So the first part I showed you, you kind of come up with the KPIs and the rate your doing criteria. The second part is during your meeting with yourself at the end of the week, for the KPI that you own, how you're doing. Is it red, yellow, or green? And your status, remember, is objective, is not subjective. It's purely objective based on the criteria that you set at the beginning of the quarter. And this happens all the time. Sometimes somebody will say, yeah, you know, we missed that number, but I feel good about the next 2 weeks, so I'm going to set it green. Don't go there. If you missed the number for the week, it is whatever it is. And then you can talk about in your weekly meeting how good you feel about it turning green, okay? But for that week, when you status it, to avoid all the drama and unnecessary discussions about status, you status it exactly where you think it's supposed to be, not, you know, based on some other emotional criteria. So meeting with yourself at the end of the week, status before coming to the next weekly meeting, and where are you stuck? Assess what's working well, what's not working well. And the more you assess, the better prepared you're going to be to have the right discussions. Then you can make your weekly meeting all about discussions and what you're going to actually do. So let's talk about the third point, which is your weekly adjustments. And the key here, it's not going to be important to talk about status. You know, it's important to talk about stocks. Actually, there's two things I think it's important to talk about in your weekly meeting adjustments. There are two types, stocks and scale. Stocks are the negative, scales are the positive. So this is what I call a minor major. It's a minor adjustment with major impact, okay? So let's talk about stocks first. Stocks are things that you need help on, things which aren't going well, which are red or yellow, and your personal feeling when you come to this meeting should be, help me get unstuck, please. Give me some help. I need to get unstuck. So the secret to getting unstuck, by the way, is you got to have a safe environment. Do not whack folks on the head with this in this meeting. Somebody comes with red, don't jump all over that person and go, what the heck's wrong with you? Why is this priority red? What the heck is wrong with, no, don't do that. Don't use the red, yellow, green as a management club. Do a kind of gentler red, yellow, green. Encourage the sharing of red. Point out that KPIs are bad. Person, not bad. KPI bad, person, not bad. And one of the pitfalls that I see happening is sometimes people get angry. Don't get angry. Don't shame people at these meetings. Nobody wants to leave a meeting with his tail between his legs. So for this part of the meeting, apply the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated to get the reds out. And you know, just think about it for yourself right now, how hard it will be for you to admit failure or that you need help with your team. It's hard. So let's just make it easier for them. The second one is more important, and the second one I found people don't do very much, and I really want to encourage you guys to do more of this, which is to scale the greens and the super greens. I think of these as bright spots. These are things which are working great. And then how do we scale this across? So I'll give you an example. With a client that had trouble with sales, right? Sales numbers were not being made. But as he looked through the various dashboards, he noticed that one particular group was actually super green in their sales. So the question is, what are they doing right? Let's not be shy. Let's go figure it out. Let's go find out what that group is doing right, and then how to scale that across all the other sales groups. I don't see enough companies doing that, scaling the stuff that works. We are usually tuned to be more analytical and focused on the reds, okay? Guys, I want you guys to think hard about how to focus on the positives and scale the greens, because I found oftentimes you can get much more benefit out of figuring out how to take a bright spot and making work across the company. So two things, right? Stocks and scale, and the focus today is on scale. Okay, those are the 3 points, and now's a good time to kind of find out if there are any other questions before I wrap up our time today.
Yeah, I got a few more questions here, Patrick. Doretta's got a question. Can a KPI be owned by more than one person?
I get that all the time. A KPI should not be owned by more than one person, and I'm pretty strict about that. I want one neck to ring. One neck to ring, guys. Now let me use the basketball analogy, okay? Somebody gets the credit for the basket, somebody gets the credit for the assist. So you can have more people working on it, absolutely. You can have 2 or 3 people getting credit for the assist, absolutely. But I think it is so important that we know who's going to go put that ball into the basket. So yes, from a management clarity standpoint, let's have one person own it, and it's okay to have 2 or 3 people working on it.
Then Paul has a question. How far in advance do you do the meeting with yourself? The day before the meeting, day of the meeting, how far in advance?
So if your weekly meeting's on Monday, and I love weekly meetings be on Monday to kind of open the week, but sometimes it just doesn't work out if, you know, you may have something else going on Mondays. But if you can have your weekly meetings do it on Monday, then I would close your week at the end of the week. So end of Friday, you know, clear your deck for half an hour before you go home, think about the week, it's fresh in your mind, etc. If your weekly meeting's on any other day, Tuesday, Wednesday, or whatever, then I would do your meeting with self the day before your weekly meeting. That way your data won't get old.
I got a question from Jody. He says, I fear that someone may not tell the truth since they're not used to coming to a meeting with the red status. How can I get them to feel comfortable enough to tell the team when they're not doing well?
So, Jody, that's a good question. And, you know, I think that it comes back to your culture and your environment. So let me just, you know, be blunt about this. I think if we have a culture that does not promote showing where things are not working, in other words, if we're used to whacking folks on the head, then they're not going to be comfortable, they're not going to feel safe to talk about reds. So I really think that what you need to do is to maybe even show up one meeting with yourself showing a priority or a KPI that's red, so people can see that, you know what, you're human, it's okay, I'm not going to get whacked on the head, and then just continue to encourage the reds. Change doesn't happen overnight, but change will happen if you encourage the behavior and then you thank people for the reds. You thank people for the reds. I tell you what, you know, sometimes some cultures are so steeped in being annoyed when people come in with reds. I go so far as even having someone on the executive team make sure that they actually bring you a red so you can begin to reverse the working culture.
Then I have a question from Joe. Joe asks, is there a list of KPIs somewhere or a source that we can look at for examples of good KPIs?
I don't know of a source that gives you a list of examples, and I found really that you know, sometimes when I do public workshops, I'll give you a couple of KPIs for each category of our 6, and usually that's okay. But I really like it when people take the time to think through themselves and the KPIs. I think every company is a little bit unique. So, for example, I know you guys need a sales KPI, but I don't know exactly how you do it. You know, some people measure number of proposals, some people measure number of contracts signed. We at Gazelle Systems actually measure number of meetings we have a week, and we'll define what we call a meeting with the right who. So, you know, every company is a little bit different, and I almost prefer you guys not to do that because I'm afraid that, you know, face it, we're all human. If someone gives us an answer, we get lazy. So I've seen actually more companies adopting other people's KPIs and therefore measuring the wrong thing. And that's actually very dangerous, so be careful with that.
Then I've got one more question here from Jennifer. She says, can you give me an example of how to run an adjustment meeting with a sales department?
Okay, how do you run an adjustment meeting with a sales department? So when you use the word adjustment meeting, obviously that means, so first of all, you know, is it a good adjustment or a bad adjustment? Let me just do both. If it's a bad adjustment and we have, in other words, something that got stuck, so okay, you know, this thing isn't working fast enough or deep enough for us, then what do we do now? You know, I would ask questions like, what has worked in the past that we maybe have stopped doing? Who else can help us? If we're stuck on one particular thing, who's the who knows more about that? And lots of times we can help ourselves faster by going to someone that already has knowledge and experience in that area. Now, if it's a positive meeting, then let's go see where is the bright spot. What is Jack over here doing? And you guys know I sometimes use Jack as a fictitious name to protect the guilty and the innocent. So what's Jack doing in this case that is blowing away performance? And then let's go replicate Jack. So spend some time also on, hey, what's working? Let's go replicate that.
And I have one more question here from Joanna. If a particular KPI has always been yellow, never red or green, is that an indication the person's lying, or should we adjust that KPI? What are your thoughts?
So my thoughts is to come up 10,000 feet. If a KPI is always yellow, I would ask the same question you just asked. Is that KPI correct? Do we even give a damn? You know, did we set the right red, yellow, green? I would also ask, is anyone excited about this? Like if something's yellow, but no one's like showing much excitement, then you probably have the wrong KPI. Now, if the person who owns the KPI has that being yellow for quite a number of weeks, how do I know that person's doing their job? Well, if that person hasn't said anything about it, then I'm sorry, they're not doing their job. If that person comes to the meeting the very first week and says, guys, I'm stuck, I need some help to figure out how to go from yellow to green, clearly that person cares about it. Then let's check to see the who, what, when list. Did we come up with action items? Were those action items done? Right? If the person has said, I need help, and we came up with ideas that the person said yes to, but then who, what, when didn't get accountable to getting them done, then I'm sorry, he or she's sucking wind, not too good. And again, be very careful. Don't use the weekly meeting to whack that person. Take it outside. But in the weekly meeting, focus on whether or not they're taking action on that KPI to move it.
Thanks, Patrick. Let's continue so we finish on time.
Okay. So today what we did was we talked about three things, all right? What is your KPIs that you can cascade to the team? And I really suggest that you focus those couple KPIs on your main thing. What is the main thing you really want to push on this quarter? And then preparation, your simple do rhythm for you to stay aligned with your entire team. Guys, I cannot make enough juice or importance about the preparation. You're going to have a meeting. If you want to improve your ROP, return on payroll, among your executive team, each one of you owe it to each other to prepare. And finally, don't be shy, do your weekly adjustments. Now, what I've found is this thing called the path of progress I want to share with you guys about. We try and put all our clients on a path of progress, and this is the path of progress. Now, some of you already have a main thing. That's great. Go work on your couple of KPIs. Some of you already have main things and KPIs. That's great. Go work on your meeting of yourselves. Okay. Some of you already have weekly meetings and all these things, but don't make great adjustment meetings. That's great. Go do that. So no matter where you are in this progression, take it one step further. What I've found is that all companies and all of us as people need to improve two things. First is we need to take the next step on actions we need to take. That's one. Second is we need to improve our skill level. So for example, if you're already having a meeting with yourself, ask yourself, hey, what am I doing during those meetings? Am I bringing anything back of importance to the team for the weekly meeting? So in your path of progress, think about where you are on this continuum of improvement, and then just take the next step. Don't get discouraged. If you're looking at this for the very first time, oh my God, Patrick, there's so much to do here. Don't. It feels like an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Take the first bite. If you didn't have anything but start on the main thing for the quarter, you would have already improved the company. So path of progress, and you improve your company, one step at a time. So we do these a couple of times a quarter. I personally do one every quarter. And so do me a favor, stay around, take my survey, help us know if our content is resonating with you so that I can help you guys more. And if you like the information you see, you can come back to the blog. If you need more help, email us. Otherwise, thank you very, very much. I've enjoyed spending this 50 minutes or so with you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Ryan, back to you.
Oh, thanks, Patrick. Thanks so much. And this concludes our webcast for the day. Thanks so much to Patrick, and thanks to you all for joining us. As Patrick mentioned, just please help us by taking a minute to give us some feedback on the webcast. The survey will automatically pop up after the webcast is over. And again, thank you very much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.